I don't feel good about watching it now, and I especially don't feel good about my daughter watching it now.
So that the sexual liberation that women have fought for and won is now being used against them.
I mean, I think there's an unwritten question about whether they're wanting you to have sex on television so they can show people having sex on television.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
And it's been another crazy week politically, and it's got no signs of abating yet. Today we're going to talk about reality TV because politics has got quite involved this week with an investigation into Married at First Sight. That's MAFS, with the Culture, Media and Sport Committee saying that Channel 4 have serious questions to answer. This show, MAFS, is something that I have been enthusiastically watching. It's been a bit of a guilty pleasure with myself and my teenage daughter that we watch MAFS. We watch MAFS UK, we watch MAFS Australia, we sit and discuss MAFS quite a lot.
I've never heard it called MAFS before.
That's literally what it's called.
Oh, right, okay. Is
Well,
it
I
like
mean, it's
Towie,
literally
and then
called
it's called Married at First Sight, and they just take the thing?
But everyone calls it MAFS.
Oh, okay.
I'm not the only reality TV fan, am I, Harriet? Because we also found out on this pod recently another piece of sensational news for me, which is that you like keeping up with the Kardashians.
I do, and there is something really gripping about reality TV, isn't there? You know, whether it's Strictly, whether it's Love Island, whether it's these, Master Chef, that ordinary people can be absolutely gripping television, but there are dangers, as MAF has found out.
And that's why we're discussing this. And I have to say, when I saw this story, I was really shocked. And then I felt terrible that I'd watched it with my daughter, if I'm honest, because what was, meant to be kind of a fun, humorous reality television show, it turned out that two women who took part in this Channel 4 series, Married at First Sight UK, have said that they were raped by their on-screen husbands. And if you haven't watched MAFS, Married at First Sight is literally what it is, in that they have experts that team up people that they think will be compatible both in attraction, like what they like physically, but also, much more importantly, actually really it's about trying to team up people that have personalities that will work. And they do this experiment to see if you meet at the altar and then you begin a marriage, and does that marriage work, and does that marriage last. Two of the women were anonymous. One went on the record, says her partner on the show threatened to attack her with acid if she spoke out about his treatment. Another woman, Shona Manderson, and she waived her right to anonymity, accused her partner on the show, Brad Kelly, who denies any wrongdoing, of sexual misconduct. And I found all of this really deeply shocking and just very, very upsetting when you've watched these programmes and enjoyed it as some light reality television, and then there's this sort of underside to it which is really dark.
I mean, it really throws into question the whole concept of consent, and really poses a challenge for the people who are commissioning and producing these shows. And I've been really thinking so much about this because it's part of the paradox of the movement of women's sexual liberation. So back in the day, there was an assumption that women didn't like sex, that it was something visited upon them by men for the purpose of procreating children, and the women's liberation movement said, no, women are sexual beings, they do want to have sex, but on their own terms, and they can actually enjoy sex. And then that spawned a whole backlash against women. So, for example, you have men standing up in court saying, yeah, I did strangle her and she is dead, but actually it was rough sex that she wanted and it's gone wrong. So that the sexual liberation that women have fought for and won is now being used against them. So these women are being put in a situation where it's, well, you're up for it because women are up for it, and finding that actually they're not up for it but the whole context is one which is where the notion of consent has all been distorted. So I think there's got to be a really big ideological hard think about where TV programs are going with this sexualization offer on these reality TV programs, which, you know, as you say, you watch it absolutely gripped with your daughter. I watch Love Island absolutely gripped, and
Do you watch Love Island?
yeah,
I did not know that, Harriet.
but
You
I do,
dark
but I
horse.
do, but I do have to. We do have questions, and wider questions like, why do these girls have to have their lips all injected? There is a question about women's autonomy and where we as women want to end up, and whether or not every time we take a couple of steps forward, we then find that we lose control of the situation and we don't end up where we want to be.
So I have to say, I'm not a big Married at First Sight fan. My wife watches it, and when Jen's watching it, I occasionally kind of walk in the room and it's on, and I can basically sit and tolerate the Australian one, which I weirdly, I don't know why I find more interesting, but I've never really been a big fan of the British one. But I think the really difficult thing that I have in all of this is that one of the two anonymous women that came forward, Beth, claims that she told both Channel 4 who broadcast it, and she told CPL, so that's the production company that makes the programme, about allegedly being raped before the programme was aired, and they put it on air anyway. And I think that's one of the things that the Culture, Media and Sport Committee are really looking at, because they've written to Channel 4, they've written to Ofcom, which is the regulator. And we've talked about Caroline Dinenage before. She's a Tory MP. She chairs the DCMS committee. She's a bit of a force of nature, actually.
She's very good.
She's very good. And she has saying that they've got serious concerns over whether enough is being done to protect people taking part in reality television, and also wants to know who knew what and when. Because I think the time, like, I mean, obviously, this is horrific. You know, we accept all of that. But the timeline is also important about whether the concerns were disregarded and stuff was aired anyway for clicks and audience and all the rest of it. And I have a little bit of background sort of slightly to the side in this, in that I spent a couple of years chairing ITV's mental health advisory group, which was born out of some of the issues that ITV had with some of the programmes that they had aired. So, for example, somebody committing suicide after being on Jeremy Kyle, some of the issues that had come out of Love Island. Dr. Alex was on the advisory group or helped the advisory group, who'd been a Love Island contestant. And as well as, because I did this kind of during COVID and just after, and as well as looking after mental health of people that work within the television industry, it was also about contributors to it and contributors to reality television, and people who are not equipped. They're not people that are normally famous, and then they suddenly get thrust into the public eye, and what those pressures are, and what can be done to safeguard them. But there are some questions about what the point of the programme is. And if you have, I don't know, a show called Love Island, where they send you off to Casa Amore, so you're not with other people, and it's called the Castle of Love, and they're putting you there together when you're in a couple. I mean, I think there's an unwritten question about whether they're wanting you to have sex on television so they can show people having sex on television. And I think there is a question mark about how ethical or otherwise that is. But I think, again, what's very different is the idea of taking people who've never met each other, putting them completely isolated, as Married at First Sight does, which is actually, I would say, quite different from Love Island, because there's not other people there. You can't blow off steam talking to folk. You know, you've not got a group and a sort of group dynamic of girls looking out for other girls and stuff like that. But you're actually putting people on a honeymoon, then in an apartment, just the two of them. You're completely isolating them in a bubble, and with much fewer checks and balances on what goes on. And do you know, I think there's going to be a huge look at whether this format is sustainable, not just in the UK, but anywhere, just because of the lack of oversight that you have, the lack of safeguarding that you have, just in the way the show is designed.
Well, I think Ruth's absolutely right about that. And of course, social media amplifies the pressure on these people. It's not on these women who are involved in these shows. It's not just the people who are watching it at the time they're watching it. It's actually all the social media that goes on and on and on afterwards on them just as individuals. And there is this construct, well, if you're having sex on the first date from Tinder, why shouldn't you actually be having sex on the TV programme and all that pressure? And I think you're absolutely right. There's got to be a big think through, not just from the Department of Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee, and Caroline Dylage, the Tory MP who chairs it, I think is absolutely excellent, but also Ofcom, the broadcasters regulator, and also the creative industries complaint system that is chaired very ably by Baroness Helena Kennedy. But I hope, and this is my hope, that the broadcasters will not get defensive and say, oh, but these women didn't complain to the police. I hope that they will actually step back and think, well, what are we doing to somebody's daughter, somebody's potential wife? Let's really think about this. So I really hope that they will respond in a thoughtful and mature way and not just get into their trenches and fight because it's all about ratings.
Are you both suggesting the upshot of this is there needs to be closer regulation of this rather than just assuming that broadcasters or production companies kind of work on good faith?
A big think and then closer regulation.
Well, I think we've seen regulation. So we saw Ofcom bring in new rules about monitoring and supporting the mental health well-being of contestants during production and after it, and that was set up after the suicides from Love Island and from Jeremy Kyle. So we have seen a change, but if all of these allegations that are true here, that change clearly hasn't worked. So I think there is a litmus test that has to be used about what's encouraging, what's otherwise. And I think, there's a broader question here as well. Marital rape was only recognised as a crime in the 1990s. Like it's that recent, and there was a sense that before that within marriages, if you were married, it was kind of your marital duty to have sex with your husband, or I guess wife or whatever. And I'm not sure. And we've talked about this in the show before about changing dynamics of relationships and sex, and the kind of democratization of really sometimes quite hardcore and explicit materials that you can find on your phone and anywhere else at the touch of a button, and the changing ideas that different generations have towards sex, actually whether we have to have a bit almost of a public conversation about not just sex and the idea that women can enjoy it and that they're allowed to ask for things and that they can have their wants and desires serviced, but actually what the limits are as well, and when you're allowed to say no and when you're allowed to draw that line, and what's not to be taken for granted and what's not, what isn't just assumed. This idea that consent has to be explicit, not just banked.
I think what Ruth has said is so important, and they've got to just do some listening and thinking.
But also just sort of as a consumer as well, you watch this stuff yourself in good faith. You're sometimes watching it with teenagers. It's part of being a parent of a teenager to try and find things that they might do with you, spend time with you. And you do it on the understanding that people participating are kept safe. And I sometimes use I would joke with my daughter, I'm like, and that is exactly how you should not let someone treat you. I mean, I found it quite a useful tool in sort of talking to her about relationships in some ways. So I think for the consumer, I mean, it kind of puts such a dark cloud, doesn't it, over something that you enjoyed or you watched, and now you feel almost like you clearly don't. I don't feel good about watching it now, and I especially don't feel good about my daughter watching it now because of these allegations. And I imagine there'll be lots of other mums of teenagers out there that probably feel the same.
Yeah, I think as well, to be fair to all parties, we have to say that we've been given a statement sent to us from Channel 4, which Channel 4 says, MAFS UK is produced under some of the most comprehensive and robust welfare protocols in the industry. These include the most thorough background checks available, a code of conduct which clearly sets out behavioural standards, daily contributor check-ins with a specialist welfare team and access to additional support before, during and after filming. Channel 4 believes that when concerns related to contributor welfare were raised through existing welfare and procedural protocols, prompt and appropriate action was taken based on the information available at the time. Channel 4 strongly refutes any claim to the contrary. Well, we also spoke to the production company as well. So that was Channel 4 that showed the programmes. CPL that made the programmes. They didn't respond to our request for comment, but they did say earlier in the week that its welfare system was gold standard and industry leading, and that it says that it acted appropriately in these cases.
The Select Committee are going to have a look at that now, aren't they? So I think that is something we're going to be covering again.
The MAF stuff is public policy. Actually, it is the politics of consent and what is acceptable. And just listening to that Channel 4 statement, it's not a good statement. I think that they should lean into a bit more of understanding of the challenge here, not just go into complete defensive mode. Channel 4 need to be part of the discussion. They've done amazing programmes which people love, but they need to show they understand the dark side and they want to discuss with people where the limits are. And that statement says they're not, they're in the right and everybody else can shut up. And that is not sustainable.
Well, as I said, I think the Select Committee will be looking at it, and I think we will be talking about this more. But that is all we've got time for today. Please do send your thoughts to the burner phone. The number for that is 07934 200 444, or you can email us at electoral.dysfunction@sky.uk.
Well, do drop us a message as well if we're going to see you next week at the live show at the Hay Festival. There are still a handful of tickets left. You can find those by searching for the Hay Festival at hayfestival.com.
And make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.